much to all the folks here at OC Tech for inviting me to be part of this event. And they kept telling me, oh, there's over 200 people. I thought, I got more and more nervous. So, but thank you. It's an honor to be part of this activity and to hear that the funds raised from this event go to support scholarships for students in higher education is, as a professional educator, the ultimate to me. I've been a professor at NC State University for, oh gosh, almost 43 years now, and served in a role that helped to support students through scholarships and taught as well. And I can't imagine a more honorable way to create funds to support students. So I applaud y'all for this, and it's an honor to be here to help support that. Hopefully you won't be disappointed in the messages that you hear, but I also want to thank Sheila and Dusty, nice to meet you as well, for making arrangements for all of this as well. All right, so I have a little bit of technical issues to take care of here, and Susan's in the room. Hopefully my slides will come up. Live by technology, die by technology. There we go. Okay. Do you mind if I come down there? I feel kind of funny up here. Do you mind? I'm going to come down here, and so I can see and look and talk to you. So we were talking. I was talking to the organizing committee about what to speak about. They had this long list, and they said, "Well, what could you talk about?" I said, "Any of those." I've taught a course called Home Horticulture for 43 years to a group of students that aren't necessarily interested in gardening. The class is an elective class for non-majors, okay? And it fulfills a requirement in their curriculum called a non-laboratory science class. So out of 100 students every semester, there are about somewhere between 18 and 24 who are really interested in growing plants, and the rest are there to fulfill a requirement. So I have to ask you, how many of you here are interested in gardening? Oh, now that's more like it. Now I'm preaching to the choir, which makes me relax a little bit. But when we were talking about topics, this whole idea about container gardening kept coming up. Now, container gardening's been a trend that's been going on for, I don't know, maybe 30 years. But it continues to keep growing. If I use the language of today, keeps trending, if you will. And actually, did you know what the #1 horticultural topic is on social media? It's not container gardening as much as it is houseplants, a subset of container gardening. So now I'm getting a lot of younger people, Gen Xers that are coming in, not Gen Xers, Gen Zers that are coming in that are, I want to learn how not to kill houseplants. That's what they want to do. I said, well, that's all about container gardening. So we isolated the first topic as being, we're going to talk about container gardening, how do we go about doing this? And next thing you know, I'm giving a demonstration, and I have zero design training in my education. I'm a scientist, y'all. So what you're going to see up here on the table is 40 years of gardening that it will come out in that container. And many of you will smile because you'll say, oh, I can do that. Right? Not many of you are going to go, oh, I couldn't do that. He knows too much. So anyway, we'll get to that. I've got some very important things to tell you about container gardening. And then the second topic, and I'll go until, how do you take an 8-week course that I teach at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum? It means 2 hours a night for 8 weeks on container gardening and distill it into 45 minutes. Thank you, Faith, so much for asking me to do that. And I'm going to try. I'm going to do my best. And then how do you take a 4-week class in pruning and then talk about that after the break? Because we're going to break and come back, because we all agree that as gardeners, the most fragile thoughts when it comes to gardening is, how do I prune that? And pruning is one of those things. I see a lot of heads bobbing. So we're going to get to that. We'll finish talking about containers. We'll take a 5-minute break, only 5 minutes. Okay, I know you. And then we'll start talking about pruning, and maybe 6:30 we'll be done. Okay. So anyway, year-round container gardens, maintaining, managing, and replacing plants. Got to talk a little bit about this. I'm so happy to be here, And now that I know you all are gardeners, maybe you can identify with this. I rescue plants trapped in the plant store. I'm not a hoarder, I'm a hero. Right? You all understand that, right? Okay, or this is the one I really love. I really only wanted to have 10 plants, but if God wants me to have 20, then 40 it shall be. And so it's not uncommon for me to go to some of my favorite garden centers in the Raleigh, North Carolina area with the intent of buying 3 plants and coming home with a pickup truck full. And so, and have no place to put them. Right? Okay, so within that context, I can't speak anywhere without saying, oh, by the way, this is this year's iteration of my backyard garden. I've gardened in the same spot for 40 years. My wife and I bought this little 3-bedroom starter home, and guess what? We're gonna finish there. I think we're gonna finish. It's a ranch, so we don't have steps. I think it's wonderful, but that means that I've killed all my plants in the same place. Okay, all my plants, and this photo I took just a few days ago, maybe last week in my backyard garden. So today I'm coming to you as a gardener, not as a horticultural professional. I'm talking to you as a gardener because we know the science of gardening, and we can talk about that all day long. And talk about the science of gardening, and then I'll walk over here and say, and this is what I do, and this is what you do. All right, and how does it apply? There's some scientific principles that if we know them, we're going to be better gardeners. Speaking to a woman earlier who was having trouble growing some things, she said, I don't have a green thumb. It's like, well, we just need a little bit of green information, and then we can apply it to those principles. Okay, so right now, container gardening is huge. Okay, these numbers are outdated by 2 or 3 years. U.S. consumers spend more than $1.5 billion a year on container gardening. Can you imagine that much money? And you know what happened when COVID hit? We spend more. We spent more. It's so funny. Gardening went up almost 20% in America when COVID hit. And then COVID leveled off and then went away, quote unquote, right? And people, the 20% that came on stopped. So they pulled them and said, why? I said, because it's hard. Gardening's hard and I have to go to work again. Okay? Baby boomer. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm a baby boomer. Okay? My kids remind me all the time. Okay, baby boomers, we're getting old, and so the size and scope of our gardens keeps shrinking. So we have this thing where we're shrinking. My brother and his wife just moved from their house to a condo. Why? Because he didn't want to have to take care of the yard. My brother's not really a gardener; he's more of a gardener. But anyway, so the scope and size is getting smaller. Okay, we have this increase in urban living. The United States has now been identified as an urban country. We have more people living in urban areas than we do non-urban areas, and so as a result, okay, we have more patios, we have more balconies, we have more decks. And when you don't have soil to dig into, you've got to plant your plants into containers. Okay, we have economic constraints. Okay, now that's kind of changing. Millennials now, turns out millennials found out they actually have some money, and they're starting to think maybe more about growing gardens. And then this houseplant boom, houseplants is crazy. There are social media sites that are devoted entirely to houseplants. It's fascinating, and college students are trying to collect. Did you know that a cut-leaf philodendron sold for over $9,000 a couple of years ago because it was some unique and interesting variety? It's like, wow, I wish I had that plant to sell. Okay, but so we've got all this fuel for container gardening. So why? What are some of the advantages? You all know these advantages. You grow plants in containers, flexibility and mobility, gardening above the ground. I mean, you walk through Charleston, South Carolina, and you see countless gardens. Not one plant is planted in the ground. They're all planted in containers. Okay, you can get more plants per square foot in a container garden than you can in a normal garden, and it's okay. If you cram those plants like that into your soil, you'd be criticized. But when you cram them into a pot, they say genius. I like to be called a genius when it comes to gardening. Right? And so that you can get more plants per square foot. Okay, they can be temporary or permanent. What I love about container gardening, I grow a lot of plants in containers, is that if I want it to be permanent, I can make that plant permanent, provided it's a perennial, it's a tree, it's a shrub. Okay, I'm on a big campaign to promote and encourage people, plant your trees and shrubs in containers. Yeah, but how big is it going to get? Well, if you plant it in a container, you can influence its growth and have it work for you. So that's kind of cool. Okay, we can use these to highlight and accent even existing garden areas. I'll show you some slides of that. Okay, outdoor living space. We can put containers in an existing home landscape. It's kind of a novel idea. Rather than just put a container on a patio, how about taking that container and put it in the midst of a garden bed, right? And then when you get tired of it being there, you move it. That's a good advantage as well. And did you know that a container garden uses less water per square foot than a normal garden? Now, y'all are looking at me going, dude, we live in South Carolina. I have to water my containers like twice a day. Yes, but the total amount of water that container garden needs compared to the total amount of water that the same plants in a garden bed is less. So it's actually a form of water conservation. I didn't say it was less work. Okay. By the way, I'm a gardener that's not concerned with the end result. I'm all about the process. And so if I'm out in my garden with my hose, because that's my mode of irrigation in my garden, my hose, and I'm standing there like this, I'm not wasting time. Okay, for me, that's Zen right there. I'm like, oh, this is wonderful. I've had a hard day at the office, and now I get to water these plants. Some people find that very inefficient. I say maybe you're not a true gardener. But anyway, we've got all these advantages. Okay, not to mention the fact that it's fun. Okay, and it creates some more beauty. But I'd like to show you a couple of slides of the ultimate container garden as things are going along. Check this one out. Okay. Isn't that great? I love the fact that the plants are growing in this container. What are you going to do with an old truck that doesn't run? Make a garden out of it. Isn't that fascinating? A student sent me that slide, said, I saw this, I thought of you, and I wasn't exactly sure why. And then this was at a botanical garden I was at. Why not? There's a tree with a knot that's got a little hole in it, and of course, something self-seeded there. So, you say, what can we use for a container? Anything. So this is just to get your ideas, but talk about the idea of decoration and using containers to incorporate into the landscape. Here you can see these whiskey barrels that are filled with a number of different annual plants for the season. Or how about a landscape? Talk about no ground at all. This was an English landscape in Bath, England, where they have no soil. So they grew all their trees and shrubs in their front patio area in containers, and it's beautiful. Or how many of you would choose to stay at a hotel that adorned the front, since it had no flower beds to speak of, okay, with these containers hanging from the windows on either side? I would, and I did. I was looking for a hotel in Bath, England, and I walked by this one. I said, I want to stay there. For the only reason I picked that hotel, it had nothing to do with the price, it had everything to do with the way that those containers decorated, or the way we can become creative by using multiple containers with different kinds of plants. Because the area of container gardening that is second to houseplants that's growing. Succulents. These weird and unusual plants from arid regions of the world that everyone is preoccupied with because they don't die. Okay? So it's one of those, and you don't have to water them. And if you forget, they say thank you. What a great, innovative way to decorate. There's a great botanical garden if you've never been. It's in Georgia, about 40 miles northeast of Atlanta, called Gibbs Gardens. I don't know how many have ever been to Gibbs Gardens, but put it on your list, because when you come from the parking lot at Gibbs and you walk here, you see this beautiful alley of river birch, and you take a right, and then this is called the Bridge of Flowers. And all these plants are plants growing in containers, not unlike the one you see right here. Boy, when I saw this, I got chills. That was great. I said, look, they must have seen my slides, because this is exactly what they have on either side of the railings. But then they also have these railing baskets with the coconut fiber where they have plants growing in. And this is just an incredible way to welcome people. I was so inspired by this, I decided I was going to do it in my own home. But I don't have a bridge. All I have is a front porch, right? And so I said, how can I accomplish this on my front porch? I just built one. And so on this side, I've got that. On the other side, so you can sit on the front porch and you're looking at these lovely plants. And then when people come and walk up the driveway, this welcomes them. So we can learn a lot by seeing and looking at containers. Yesterday afternoon, on my way down, I stopped at Riverbanks and took a bunch of photographs of containers. And you're going to see a few today. I love digital photography because you can take what you took yesterday and incorporate it today. But yeah, I had one of those there for the front porch and incorporated those plants. So some container gardening basics. Now that I got your juices flowing, you say, I want to know how to do this. Let's talk about some basics. Usually takes about 2 weeks for me to go through this, but we're going to go take 2 minutes. All right, you ready? Here we go. Containers. Guys, when you use containers, I don't care. Everybody gets all worried about what kind of container should we use. Should we use plastic? Should we use ceramic? PVC, what kind? It doesn't matter. All the research says that you just use a container, okay? But the research also says, and I don't care what kind of container it is, but it better have holes in the bottom, okay? Any of you are growing plants in containers that have no holes, shame on you. Stop it. Okay? I tell my students that, and a couple of years ago, a student came back, he lived in the mountains, he came back from the mountains in North Carolina, he said, I talked to my grandmother, all her plants are in containers with no drainage holes, and she grows them just fine. And I told her what you said, and she said, tell that damn Yankee to go back where he belongs. So y'all, I have learned not to criticize grandma. The research shows that if there's place for extra water to go, the better off you're going to be. You see, when you put media, that's the fancy word for potting soil, okay? When you put media in a container, the physical properties of that soil change. They don't behave the same way as they do in the soil in the ground. Which way can water move in this container? There's only one. Down, okay? Which way can water move in the soil? Down and out, right? That changes. The physical properties change, and so you better have a media that drains well, and you better have a place for that extra water to go. You say, yeah, but I go to the garden center and I see pots that don't have drainage holes. What do? Punch some in them. Okay? If you look carefully at this pot, you look down the bottom, there are 2 holes that can be drilled out or poked out with a screwdriver. Do that. You say, yeah, but what about those pots that don't? Well, for the pots that don't, this isn't a utility pot, but take a utility pot and put it in the pot. That's called double potting. And the extra water, where does it go? It drains through the drainage holes into the bottom. You say, yeah, but the pot's sitting in water. Put a couple of rocks in the bottom, 3 rocks in the bottom, and now you've got a double potted situation that you can use any decorative pot, even when it doesn't have a drainage hole. All right, so that's the drainage hole. You say, what's next? The next one is the potting soil, okay? Here's what you need to know about potting soil. Buy it from a reputable dealer. I don't care what kind it is, whether it's Miracle-Gro potting soil, Espoma pot, what doesn't matter, okay? Shouldn't say organic on it. I wish I had time to talk to you about how silly it is for a company to put organic under potting soils, seeing how everything in the soil is, whether it's organic or not. And when you put something like this stuff into a potting soil, this is perlite, this adds drainage to the soil. This is from lava rock, right? It's from a rock. Technically, anything from a rock is not organic. And there are hundreds of potting soils sold with the name organic potting soil that have perlite in them. Now, we could spend the whole rest of the day talking about the targets we should be shooting at as gardeners, organic versus inorganic, synthetic versus organic, okay, composted versus, we're not going to do that today, but I would love to talk about it. Anyway, reputable dealership, whether it be Miracle-Gro, whether it comes from Supersod, all right? This material is great. What I'm really excited about with Supersod is that the veggie mix cube, okay, has got more pine bark fines in it, so there's better drainage of water, okay? And so you could use this unadulterated, okay? I'm gonna have some comments about perlite because me and perlite, we go way back. And I have a really hard time not using perlite in my container. I don't care whether, yes, you can use these guys unadulterated in a container and your plants will do just fine. But I'm of the gardener opinion that when you add perlite, you're adding more drainage. And for more drainage, you have more percolation of water through the soil column, which is an important thing. The more percolation you get, the healthier your plants are going to be because you keep adding oxygen to that soil. That doesn't mean there's not enough percolation in these. It just means I have a thing about perlite because I know it's this inert rock that adds airspace. Sometimes I'll add pine bark fines. But look, this product has actually added it for me, so now I can use that. Okay? But why am I choosing a reputable one that's in a bag that's sealed? Because it's pasteurized, it's been treated in such a way that I can be confident that my potting soils don't have weed seeds or insects or anything like that. Grabbing soil out of the garden is a dangerous thing. Okay? We need to stop doing that. All right, let's go back. Perlite, amend as needed. There we go, and I'll talk a little bit. Oh, okay, somebody always says, well, give us a recipe. Here's the recipe I use. 3 parts potting soil, I don't care what brand, what kind, to 1 part perlite by volume, not by weight, by volume, okay? And that improves drainage. Well, Bryce, that means you have to water more frequently. Correct. Correct. Yes, but that's more work. How many of y'all have pets? I rest my case. Pets, they go out and walk. I gotta walk them in the morning, walk them in the afternoon, but don't make me have to water more. Well, then don't be a gardener. Just take care of your pets. Water to saturate. We're going to talk about watering. Watering is easy when you have drainage holes. How do I know when I'm done watering? When it pees all over the patio, then you know you watered enough. Water to saturate, so that all the pores are filled with water, and then gravity pulls that extra water out of the larger pores and puts it on and drains it through the drainage hole. Because by doing that, you've added significant amount of oxygen. Y'all, if you don't remember anything about today, when you're driving home this afternoon, I want you to be saying in your head, roots grow where there's water and oxygen. Roots grow where there's water and oxygen. If you remember that, you'll be a better gardener. You will be a better gardener, okay? It's oxygen. And the only way you're going to get more oxygen into a soil is by running water through it so it sucks fresh air out of the atmosphere into the larger pores. And to do that, you have to have drainage holes and larger pores. Okay? What about gravel in the bottom? Stop it! No! You put gravel in the bottom, you are just creating a shorter soil column that's not going to drain as well. Bryce, that doesn't make sense. I don't have time to explain the physics. But I'll tell you what, I'll give you a hint. Go home, grab a rectangular sponge, and get in the shower. I'm not going to say anything more. You're all going to wonder, what do I do with the sponge? All right. So I thought I'd put big pictures so you, in case you can't see this, but great product, great material to use. It's all organic because there is no perlite in there. And like I said, the veggie mix has more pine bark. Pine bark fines in there to create more spaces, which creates larger pores, better drainage. Okay, so when you water to saturate, fertilizer. Let's talk about, we can spend all afternoon talking about soils, but here's the bottom line on fertilizer. Bottom line on fertilizer is very simply this. If you've got a material you're going to use, you have 2 options. You can mix it in before you plant, or you could apply after you plant, or you could use some kind of liquid and do that. It doesn't matter which one you use. Okay, what do I use? Well, you could use something called Osmocote, which is a slow release fertilizer, and based on the recommendations, you mix that into your media before you plant. You could use something called Plant Tone, which is an organic-based fertilizer by Espoma Company. Great company with a wonderful product. You mix that into the soil as well, based on the recommendations that they have on the back. Okay? Both work just as well. You can use them for top dressing as well if you so desire. Typically, I use Plant Tone, and then what I do is I supplement during the growing season. Okay, I supplement with a liquid material every 10 or 15 days as I see fit for those different containers that I grow. If I'm growing a woody plant in a container, all I do is mix in my soil is mix the fertilizer early, and then I don't supplement with liquid. But if I've got something that's using a lot of nutrition to grow, like many of our annuals, then I'll supplement like that as needed. It works out fine. Okay, we have to change our philosophy when we talk about gardening in containers if we're going to put a container together. Okay, my wife says, Bryce, you have a problem. Well, she said I have many problems. We've been married for 46 years, but she says you have a problem. You think more is better. Okay, and she said that translates into the way you live your life, right? And she said even when you do containers, you're trying to put more in there because you think it's better. And I said, hold it right there. In this case, more is better. Okay? What's so cool about growing plants in containers, especially for making container gardens, we want that container to look like it's supposed to look the minute we finish putting those plants in there. Okay? Yes, but won't the roots be insulted because there are other roots? It's a container garden. Most of those plants are annuals, and all they have to do is survive for the growing season. Cram them in there. Okay? Julie, didn't you tell me I was supposed to say that? Okay. Buy more plants. No. Seriously though, because when you do, you end up with displays that look like this once they grow out a little bit. All right? Okay? So You all heard this. I'm not telling anybody anything new, but I always like to remind myself, not every container has to be thriller, filler, spiller, but what a great recipe for the dumb one. Okay, for the one that can't, I don't have any design aspects. I've learned a little bit about color, but I love to start with something tall, fill it in with a filler, and then something that's going to cascade down. Bryce, does that mean we have to? No, you could do filler, 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 and it would look fine if you chose the right plants. But this is a great way to start where you have something tall. There's your thriller. Your filler fills that midsection, and then the spiller spills out over it. All right, so let's take a look at some examples. The banana is the thriller. The sweet potato vine is a filler along. See, sometimes they can be filler and spiller all at the same time. Okay, you can't say you're going to be the filler, and all of a sudden it starts to cascade. You stop it. No, you can still do that. Liz Maki, boy, there's that wonderful yellow leaf plant is a great spiller, and all your coleus are wonderful fillers. Be careful though, because if you can't tell a coleus you're a filler, and it will not grow taller than the thriller. Sometimes your fillers get excited, and so that's okay. Dracaena, and we've got some small Dracenas here we'll use for the demonstration. It's a great way to create that thrilling, upright habit. Two ways you can do a pot too. Take a look at this. You can put your thriller right in the middle because you want to do a three-dimensional deal, right? Or you could say, this is going to be up against the wall of a house in the corner, and you can put your thriller in the back and build it from there. You have those choices, all right? And you can do that. And so there, we'll leave the thriller there when we get back to it. Here's some examples at a local box store. Not your local, my local box store. And these are ready for sale. So they've crammed them in, grown them a little bit in the greenhouse. Okay. And they say, oh, this is the Bermuda skies with thriller. I like this. They've got two petunia types, then the Dracaena and the Scabiosa there. So here's one of mine. My own homemade recipe. You say, where's the thriller? The spiller, I forgot. So now I'm just doing a thriller filler. And it works out great. Here's one where the upright barberry is being choked out by everything else in the container. That happens a lot in container gardening. If you notice, okay, you have this great idea for what it's going to look like, and then one of them doesn't get the memo and takes over. Okay, that's always difficult. Oh, this one came out real well. That's a burgundy leaf colocasia with the sweet potato vine. And then there's some Bolivian begonia that's also contributed here, but you can see that between the colocasia and the sweet potato vine, there was some competition. And you're always going to get some competition as the season progresses. Here using alocasia with some other plants. This one I saw in Charleston. I thought it was really cool. This was like a winter. Don't poo-poo the idea of creating winter containers. Look at this one. There's a pittosporum there, and they put a cyclamen there for color, and then filled it with ferns. Guys, I think we need to start using more and more ferns in our containers because they're wonderful filler plants, right? And they give you a lot of room there. Here are petunias with an eggplant. Now here's one where I just said I'm going to do filler. So I use Calibracoa, the mini bells, along with the verbena, and I just mix them in and let them grow and cascade over. So there's all kinds of unique ideas. Guys, I'm trying to stimulate your thoughts. I want you to get in the car and not only say, roots grow where there's water and oxygen, but also say, I could do that. I could do that. If at the end of today's presentation, you walk out those doors, you say, this was the best presentation I ever heard, and you don't change your gardening behavior, then I would have failed you. I want you to come home with some tidbits that you can use even this afternoon. All right? So here was a great idea. I had a copper leaf, I had a New Guinean patience, and I had this yellow leaf coleus. Thriller, filler, spiller. Want to see what it came out to be? Coleus said, I'm going to just take it. So the coleus just went nuts. Say, well, you could have proved it. Yes, I could have. But I was busy in the backyard watering. Okay? Sometimes we don't always get it right. What do you call that? That's a green ball on a stick. This is on our own NC State campus. Okay? That's like It looks like somebody's giving somebody the finger. That's what it looks like. Right? So sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes we don't. So before I talk about replacements and whatnot, I got to do a demonstration because all of this great stuff that was brought here. Sheila, thanks so much. But the idea, see these hydrangeas right down here in the front? There's no rule that says you can't stick one of those in a container. For how long? For its whole life. You could use that permanently. Put a hydrangea in a container and just grow it singly in a container and move it around, put it in different places, all those benefits from it. And then in a minute, I'll talk to you a little bit about, okay, so how do I overwinter that and how do I deal with it from one year to the next? Okay, so here's a pot. I filled it with material. Now, you might not, good. Susan, you're on it. Thank you so much. You might not be able to see, maybe now you can see. So I've mixed my perlite into the soil mix. And so that's what's in this container. Rather than fill it up in front of you where lots could go wrong, I did it earlier. Okay, and so now it's about that depth below the top of the pot. So I'm going to take this guy out. And of course, when you take these plants out, it's not open heart surgery. I've had to convince my mother, years ago, I had to convince my mother that repotting plants was not like, putting somebody on the heart lung machine where you have to hurry up and do it. And she'd be screaming at me, hurry up, it's gonna die. And I go, Mom, it's not gonna die. I put it like this, I'd say, let's go eat lunch. And then we'd go eat lunch. And she'd go, we can't eat lunch, it's out of the pot. It's fine, okay? You wanna stimulate root growth. For those of you who have anxiety problems, this is wonderful because you can this is very soothing. Very soothing. And then I'm just going to sit that right in the middle. I think I'm going to do a three-dimensional. So I'm going to do that. So let's see. Oh, my spiller is this Bacopa. This is such a great little plant, little purple flowers with yellow centers. I'm gonna take my spillers out. I'm going to just do a little bit with the roots. I'm going to stick one there. Oh, by the way, 3, 5, 7. Stop with the 2, 4, 6. All right. In gardening, both in containers as well as in the landscape, odd numbers work. Please don't ask me why, but they do. And there's one down here. So I'm going to put. Oh, it's one in the front too. That's fine. We'll just use. So we'll put this guy. We'll put this guy here. You say, well, it's getting kind of crowded. We haven't even started. Okay. So now isn't this cute? This little yellow. Okay. Well, we only have one of those. You say, well, 1. It's an odd number. We're okay. Okay. And I've decided that's gonna be my feature filler plant right here in the front. And then this is so cool. This is a variegated lantana. So not only does it have the variegated leaves, it has yellow flowers. Do you notice I'm sticking with the yellow blue? Okay, color people out there. Real easy for gardening. I follow these rules, okay? You want to use colors that are opposite the color wheel. Right? So yellows and blues or orange and purple. Okay, I don't understand why, but it brings a sense of comfort when people look at it. So I always go to that. All right, so I'm going to put this one over here. And since I'm cheating a little bit, you know what? You can cheat. This is the other one. I'm putting it back here. And so what's interesting is I've got these 2 yellow lantana in the back and the calibraco in the front. Not a problem. You say, well, you're done. No, I'm not. Now, the Dracaena is going to get larger. Okay, what's so cool about the Dracaena is, depending on where you live, and being here in South Carolina, this sometimes you can overwinter this right in the pot. It's great. I see a lot of heads bobbing. That's good. That's reaffirming. Okay, and so all of this can be pulled whenever, and you can replace it with whatever, whenever. And people just don't realize that this container, it's that simple. Well, do I have to change the soil? No. Once the calibracoa starts to look like it's tired, don't your plants look tired in early September? Mine do too, right? August, right? It's like they're so tired. I look tired in August and September as a gardener. So I'll go down to my local garden center and I'll grab some things that are much more active in the fall, and I'll yank these out and put them in. Simple as that. So replacement is not rocket science. Replacement is just something to remember to do. I'm saying that because I often forget it. Right? And then when winter comes, we can pull them out, and what can we do? Stick the coral bells in there, the euchroas, right? Here's it. I don't know about in Raleigh, this plant does B plus work in the wintertime. Okay? I can only imagine in 8B, that's your hardiness zone, that this plant would do A minus to A work in the wintertime. So this becomes a great addition to a container in the winter. You can transform your summer container into a fall container, into a winter container, just by being selective. You say, yeah, Bryce, but that plant's still alive. It's just a plant. My neighbor he laughs at me. My neighbor's, he's a born-again gardener. He never gardened. He never gardened. And then one day he came to me middle of the night, knocked on my door and said he wanted to be a gardener. And what did he have to do? I said, come see me on Saturday morning. And what he says, the most important lesson he's learned from me is that I don't have a problem when a plant dies. I don't have a problem killing a plant, right? Because that just spells more opportunity, right? It's just a new place for another plant to go. So I get to go down to my favorite plant place and buy. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack this in a little bit more. I've got these two white lantanas that I'm going to throw in there as well. I'm going to take this. And you notice I haven't added any soil yet, all right? Oh, so this is going to really fill up the middle. Now, some of you know lantana, and you're saying, you're asking for trouble. These things are going to grow like gangbusters. Yes, they are. It's going to give me an opportunity to be selective, all right? Do you see how I'm cramming them in there, all right? Now, I might have purchased a bigger Dracaena or something taller in the middle. I mean, Angelonia is one of my favorite annuals. So now granted, just squint your eyes on the color part. Okay, I'm just showing you from a stature part. So now, besides an ornamental grass is not a bad thriller at all. But even a tall annual like an Angelonia might work real well. Copperleaf is another one that tends to be more linear. All right, but we'll go back and do that. So now that when I'm finished, now this is the tedious part. I'm going to come in with my hand and I'm going to start filling soil in around the base. Okay, and rather than do that, because if I did it, demonstrating it, we'd be here all afternoon. I mean, it doesn't take that long, but so yes. Okay. Don't clap unless you really mean it. That didn't sound good. All right. Okay, so let's go back to the slides here for a second. All right. Oh, I guess I have to do that, Susan. Okay, so when it comes to replacing plants in your containers. I didn't do that. There we are. As needed during the summer. So the key word here is as needed. What the heck does that mean? As needed. All right. If there's a plant in your container, you don't like the way it's performing, then it's as needed. You're going to yank it out. You're going to go down to your local garden center, box store, whatever. You're going to find something that you can replace in that spot. Okay. Well, what kind of magic do I have to do? Nothing. Just take the old one out. Now, granted, the roots will have spread. You might have to go in and pull it out, and then put the new one in, and put the new one in. So it's that simple. Okay. Fall replacements. Use new healthy annuals. Snapdragons and pansies are things that go in late fall they could go into existence. Hey, why not do this? Why not put for your thriller a permanent woody plant? And then build around based on the season that you've got. I'll show you some examples here in a second. In the late fall, add cold-tolerant annuals, heuchera, snapdragon, pansy, etc. See, I got ahead of myself. Consider winter combinations for your containers. Look at this container on the left. There's Edgeworthia with some blue fescue and ornamental grasses in a container. And that's going to last that's going to take you all through December, January, and then in February and early March, the flowers on Edgeworthia, big giant yellow fragrant flowers are going to come out in early spring. Or here's one where you're using cast iron plant with English ivy and two coral bells. It's a great winter arrangement to display. Okay. In these cases, we're moving away from winter. These are existing summer. As soon as something begins to wane, pull it out. And you say, well, what should I put in there? Go to your garden center and find another annual that's just as healthy, maybe healthier than what you took out, and replace it. Okay. I like this on the left-hand side. There's amaryllis in the back. So amaryllis is your thriller. and then you've got some variegated grass-like plants, and then caladium in the front. Well, guess what? As soon as the amaryllis are done, then you don't have much, right? You say, well, what do I do? Am I stuck with that? No, dig them up, transplant them somewhere so that they can either into the garden or in another container, and choose another thriller for that spot, right? Oh, I love this one. This is a red twig dogwood with snowdrops, and then a mondo grass, a black mondo grass. What a great winter combination where you have the bright stems. And what I love about this is come springtime, you could leave that shrub in there, and the leaves are going to come out and have some nice white flowers, and you can plant other things around it. There's no limitation. Here's some early spring containers. In this case, you've got geranium with Gerbera daisy, and you've got the sweet alyssum. Sweet alyssum, I mean, if you've got to plant that in February and come maybe by now, I don't know if sweet alyssum is starting to look crappy here now, but it's a very short-lived early spring. But use it, and then pull it out and put something else in it that's going to be a little bit more beautiful. I love this. This is garden phlox with petunias, and then the marguerite sweet potatoes. All right, in a whiskey barrel. And again, winter combinations where you've got dracaenas with heucheras and euphorbias. I took this picture yesterday. This is at Riverbanks, and they had just planted some annuals around that hydrangea that had been in there all season long. So they don't have to take, the containers there are this big. And so you say, oh, they're flexible, mobility. No, they're not moving those. Okay, they've got maybe a forklift that would have to move them. No, they're just pulling out the winter plants and they're putting in their summer plants, but their base is that hydrangea, which is in the background. Or here, I love this. It's a purple leaf weeping contorted filbert. So there's that woody plant in the container, and then they just added there's a little carex here, and they're adding some summer flowers down in front. So all of a sudden we begin to develop this kind of rotational aspect to it. One on the right too was at Riverbanks, and so they got Dusty Miller with Calibrachoa, and then the purple leaf Merlot redbud. And you say, you can grow redbuds in containers? Yes. And you say, well, I don't have a container that big. Y'all, you can grow a redbud. I grow redbuds in this. And I keep it in this for years. Have I got your curiosity up? Okay, so I got 3 minutes to satisfy that. Okay. How about just putting one stinking plant, this angel wing begonia, in a container, and then find a place in the landscape, place it there for people to enjoy. It doesn't have to be complicated as far as what kinds of things do I mix together as much as that. Or a mangave here that I put here because of the pink flowers on the spirea. By the way, that spirea is in the ground. That mangave is in a container. And you see how the pink pulls out the pink in the leaves? I did that on purpose. Okay? And I say that because most of the great things that happen in my garden happen by accident. Okay. I was at a garden in Germany, on the island of Mainau, and I went to get lunch, and I went into the outdoor cafe, and here at these tables were plants planted in containers, okay, in between the two areas. It was brilliant. Okay, it was a table with plants in the middle, all right, which was great because I didn't mind sitting here across from strangers because the plants were in the way. Whereas it was a table all by itself, I would have been a little bit more nervous about sitting next to somebody. I didn't know if they spoke my language or not. And guess what the plants did? Okay, they mitigated that relational situation. We ended up having a conversation, right? Because we looked over. By the way, the pear trees are in a container underneath the table, grow right on through, and there's pears hanging from the tree. So we had a nice conversation, and I dared the guy to pick a pear, and we didn't know whether it was legal or not. But we had a great time. But look at the combination in a container. You say, well, what about drainage holes? I looked. They had them. But they didn't water while people were eating. That would be a disaster. Okay. But how about getting creative like something like that? The last thing is, how about growing herbaceous and woody perennials in containers? Well, Bryce, if you do that, you just said you grew a redbud in this. How do you handle it? Okay, I live in North Carolina, y'all live in South Carolina. You can grow a redbud in this container, okay? You buy it in a gallon or a 5-gallon and put it in this container, and you can leave it in there for 3 to 5 years before you have to repot it. 3 to 5 years. And at the end of that 3 to 5 year period, what I do is I take it out. Come on, there it is. I take it out. I prune 2/3 of the roots off. What? 2/3 of the roots I take off. And then what do? I put it back in the same container it was in with new soil. And you know what that does for this? It gives it a whole new root zone to grow in, fresh soil, as well as kind of stunts its growth a little bit. Well, that's great, because where I have my red bud, I don't want it spreading wide. And if I do that every 2 to 4 years, every 2 to 5 years, I do that same thing back in the same container, I end up with a tiny, tiny little woody plant for the area I have growing. I love to grow woody plants in containers. Well, can we do it for these? Yes. Hey, how about perennials? Why not? Why not grow a hosta in a container? I can't grow hosta in the ground. I can't. When I grow hosta in the ground, they die. Have I got you curious about that? Okay, just hold on. So not only that, but I'm going to divide perennials in the pot. And so when I divide the perennials in a pot, if I have one perennial in a pot, I pull it out, cut it into 4 pieces, I take a fourth, put it back in that same size container, and then I have 3 to give away. Makes me a very popular gardener. All right, so this is a Japanese maple that I have been growing in that container now for about 5 years. And every 3 years I repot it. Okay, my hosta, I grow all my hosta in containers. Look at them all. Okay, look at this photo here. I took this just yesterday morning. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 hosta in this bed. Didn't even know it, did you? Why not? Because the hosta spread out and covered the rims of the pots. Remember, I told you if I grow hosta in the ground, they all die. So as long as I grow them in containers, they all live. I have these things called voles in my garden. And guess what the #1 food is for voles? Hosta. Hosta. So now I have hosta gardens that are all in containers. Bryce, what do you do in the wintertime? I leave them there. I leave them there. Hosta are zone 3 to 9. 3. That means that you can put them sub-zero and they're still going to live, even though, oh, there's my alarm, even though they're in containers. So I don't even move them. Well, how often do you repot them? You know, hosta, you could say, I'd say 3 years, but sometimes I forget and it's 5. They don't care. They really don't care. They're a great plant to grow in containers. Okay? And this is what they look like as the growing season progresses. Right? So this is a new garden I just planted. Each and every one of those hosta and those 2 ferns, these 3 ferns, they're all in containers. So I'm using containers in a totally different way to landscape. Okay? If my soil sucks and I can't build it, or if I've got critters that are going to come after them, okay, then I've got them in containers. And guess what? When I get bored, I get to move them around. Right? And when I go to repot them, I have that kind of stuff to deal with. I just slice them up. Slice and dice and divide. It's no big deal. And so you've got all these choices, winter ornamentals, and you've got Japanese maples in containers. I love to grow Japanese maples in containers. Hydrangeas. This is macrophylla here. Here's a limelight hydrangea in a container that really adds to the landscape. There's hydrangea with some of your annuals, Dusty Miller and the sweet potato. What I love about this Japanese maple is I've got things that I can change in and change out during the growing season. I can come up with a whole winter display, even though the leaves have fallen off. I've got architecture that I can work around. Okay. I have these are epimedium bishop's caps, and I haven't decided where I want to put them, so I grew them for 3 years in a container before I finally took them and put them somewhere else. Okay. Consider potscaping. This is a technique where you use lots of different plants in containers and you create their own self-sustaining landscapes. And what's so cool about this is as soon as that plant stops flowering, pull it out of the potscape and put another one in. And so you can create these very unique and interesting floral arrangements with plants that are all in pots. Consider doing that in your own landscape. Here was mine. I took a few right in the front patio, put them in there, and then by a month and a half later, this is what it gave me. And there are ways that you can. I didn't do this. This was at Longwood Gardens where they decided to do a begonia display in a potscape. Think of doing vignettes if you're going to do containers in 3. Once again, 3 to 5. where you can accent and play off the other plants in the container. We had a graduate student by the name of Jared Barnes. He's now a professor at Stephen F. Austin State University. He lived in government subsidized apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina while he was a student, but he was this incredible gardener. And he had to have a garden. So all his plants were in containers. Every one of those plants is in a container. The ultimate potscape. Can you tell where my containers stop and where my regular garden starts? No, that's the whole idea behind having that level of flexibility. Or to take this black cardinal colocasia and in the container, shove it right in the middle of that garden when it's really doing its thing. So we have all kinds of unique and interesting ways that we can grow plants in containers. So when you ask yourself, what kind of container? Shoes. Last story about this. I went and visited this woman. She gardens in Blacksburg, Virginia, and she had a rack with all these shoes with plants growing out. I said, this is very clever. And she says, yes, when people come to visit, I ask them if they have extra shoes that they don't want. And they give me their shoes. She said, I drill holes in the bottoms of the shoes. And she said, then I do that. I said, well, that's great. And then I was looking at the shoes and I noticed around the shoes are bones. And I didn't have the heart to go, so what do you do with your visitors after you take their shoes? Do you have enough that you could do something different this afternoon? Good. So now that we've talked about how to grow plants, let's talk about how to prune them. And what I think we're going to do right now is if we could take a 5-minute break, stretch your legs, whatever, follow the instructions, and we come back, we're going to change gears and talk about pruning. Hey guys, thanks for your attention. Good morning.
Oh, excuse me, I am so sorry. I'm sorry. But actually, think about it. I just want to call, I know you can't, but didn't the plant depot outdo themselves with themselves? Diana and their whole team put this together. They done an amazing job in providing Bryce with plants he needs for his demonstration. And if you had a chance to come in early, you got to hear the music from Raymond Tucker, who's the minister of music at First Press. appreciate him sharing his talents with us. And of course, we could not happen without all of our sponsors and friends who come to support us. But I can't overlook thanking all those college volunteers. It takes a lot of people to pull this together. There's so many people that volunteer to help. So I appreciate everybody's support there. And I hope you all got a bag on the way in. Those were donated by Superside. So don't forget to look inside. You're going to have a coupon for a discount at the Plant Depot. You've got the tools you need to test your soil. Some notepads if you need to take any notes during Bryce's next demonstration. So just don't overlook that. And the other thing that I need to say is that I need to recognize the special couple that's with us today. Bill and Penny Summers are celebrating their 53rd anniversary. And if you've been around very long, if you've been one of these long-time attenders of our event, you know that this is our 18th year, and it all started under Penny's direction as executive director of our foundation. I was just fortunate enough to follow in Penny's footsteps. But, you know, the good thing is she's still only a phone call away. So when I have a question or need somebody to laugh with, Penny's my go-to. So I'm just so glad it's a compliment to all of us that they've chosen to spend their anniversary with 250 or something. Oh, did you hear that? She passed a trip up to Bermuda to be with us. So you know this is an important event. Reagan and I are going to take a couple minutes to draw real quick with some door prizes, and we'll do that at the end. But we've got some great plants. We've got, let me get this right, peaches from Big Smile Farms, and we've got some strawberries from Forest Farms over in the Johnston area. Did I get that right? So in the interest of time, why don't we just draw the door prizes, and then we'll leave them over here, and you pick them up at the end, rather than having to come up next. So our first winner is, let's just do the last numbers, 866. Anybody got 866? No winner? Okay.
I just said fun.
No 866. Okay. Oh, great. We got a winner. Okay, then you're gonna get
We're gonna get a plant and some fruit donated from our farms in Johnston, South Carolina.
okay. 848. Oh, good. We got a winner back there. 848. Okay. 891. 891. Okay, good. Have it. All right. What do we have? One more. And 894. Okay, all right. Then we'll do one more. And this is 946. Oh, good. The anniversary man. So I'll stick around long enough, we'll draw again at the end. But I don't want to take any more of our time because I know we all enjoyed Bryce so much with his first presentation. I don't want to delay. But I'll be honest, Bryce, I'm not the pruner in my family. And my children and I all jokingly laugh about my husband, Bob, who's here today. And we say there's never a tree or a shrub that he has met that he doesn't like. And he loves to prune and perhaps over prune. And I think Barbara McComb, my next door neighbor, is here. She might have even seen some of his unconventional pruning techniques. And that would be leaning out the upstairs window. So, not that he needs any guidance, but like all of us, I'm just glad we have the opportunity today to maybe perfect our pruning techniques with Bryce. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bryce.
Can you hear me again? How many prune? How many like to prune? Come on now. Pruning is one of my favorite gardening activities. So we're talking on the phone, and I said, well, I do this talk called Nuts and Bolts of Pruning. He said, ooh, that sounds kind of good. Maybe we learned a little bit more about pruning. And I thought, yeah, this would be a great topic to talk about when it comes to gardening. It's not uncommon that I'll be out pruning in my landscape, all right, and one of my neighbors will come over and they tiptoe, right? And they come over and they say, is now a good time to prune? And I'll just come back with, sure, now you can. What is it about pruning that makes us feel so uneasy and so concerned? You know, pruning is one of those things that actually, if you don't know why you're pruning, you better stop. All right? Seriously, the concept, I back when I first started at NC State many years ago, I did a poll of 300 home gardeners, and I said, why do you prune? Anybody want to guess what the number one answer was? Number one answer was because you're supposed to. If you don't have a logical reason to prune, put your pruners away, all right? It's not something that is obligatory. You've got to have a good reason to do it, all right? So let's look at, first of all, when it comes to pruning, how do we define it? Anytime you remove a plant part, you're pruning. So to get these strawberries, they had to be pruned off the plant. I mean, that's how literal we are when we talk about pruning. Anytime we remove plant parts. But the question is, why prune? Why would we want to prune? Well, I just gave one, to harvest. You prune to harvest. That's a logical reason to prune. All right. What about, this is everyone's favorite, right? Size control. Okay. I'm not saying you prune in order to maintain the size or to reduce the size. We call that size control. Okay. That's a reflection of a number of different approaches to gardening. All right. Part of it is you're a really bad plant designer, and you've chosen a plant that grows way bigger than the space you have for it. All right. Now, most of us gardeners are like that because I'll find myself at the garden center. I'll pick the plant up, and it says 4 feet tall by 4 feet wide, and I'm looking for a plant to fill a space that's 2 by 2. And I go, well, that'll work. Because if you're a gardener like me, you lie, and you lie to yourself. I lie to myself all the time. It says full sun. If the sun's out, I'm planting it there. Okay? That's why plants fail so much, because we lie to ourselves. We say, oh, it'll work. Right? So ultimately, we take a plant that's going to grow 5 times the space that we have for it, and none of us commit to pruning. See, the British are great when it comes to pruning. They'll take a shrub that they know is huge, and they'll say, I'm going to put it in this little spot, and they'll say, I'm committing to pruning it. All right? And so that commitment spells knowledgeable horticulture. The person that buys a plant that's way too big for its space and plants it, and then wakes up 3 years later and goes, oh my gosh, I have to prune it. That's ignorance. Do you hear the difference? All right? So you can justify buying things and planting things that are bigger than the spot you have for them, but just take the British approach. Commit. And once you commit, then you're a genius. Right? Shape in unnatural form. Okay? These used at Hampton Court Palace. Okay, that's where Henry VIII brought all his wives on their honeymoon. Anyway, these are used, and that is not their natural shape. Now, I didn't say that it's wrong to do that, but I'm recognizing that I'm committing to pruning that plant not in a natural shape. All right? Eliminate hazards or structural problems. You have a low branch. So every time the every time the Amazon guy comes, right, he hits his head on the branch. That needs to be pruned in order to eliminate that hazard or that structural problem. Stimulate growth. Oftentimes we prune fruit trees in order to stimulate growth that's ultimately going to equal more fruit. All right. Thin a canopy. We've got a shrub or a tree that's got such thick branching that the air can't move well through it, and all of a sudden we get wet areas that contract diseases, fungi, that type of thing. We need to open up that canopy, thin it out a little bit to get better air movement, and maybe even consider architecturally helping it. Anybody here ever wake up in the morning and look in the mirror? I'm laughing because it happened to me this morning. Look in the mirror and there's a wild hair. Do you ever leave your house? No. If you see it in the mirror, what do? You cut it. Right? So sometimes we're pruning just to cut those wild hairs, just to take care of something aesthetically. And then, of course, I do a lot of pruning just to propagate. Where I see a plant and I say, oh, I want this, and I take a piece of it. I've just pruned a piece off in order to propagate it. So my point is, to go back to the beginning, don't prune unless you have a logical reason to do so. Well, I'm repotting my Japanese maple in container, and I'm putting it back in the same container. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna prune the root system in order to stimulate growth in the same size pot it was in. Not only am I stimulating root growth, but I'm actually suppressing above ground growth. There, I've just tied the earlier talk in with this one. Okay, but again, to think logically about why we want to prune. Okay, so, and then harvest, already talked about that one. And then cleanup too. Okay, my wife gets very angry at me in the fall. By the time November, December comes around, I'm done in the garden. Honestly, I'm done. I leave the plant bed that looks right out from our sunroom, I leave it just as it was. And all those perennials die, and they just sit there, and come January, March, like, why don't you clean that bed up? Like, I'm not going to. Why not? Well, I now have a good reason. All the plants that I have in there provide protection for birds, and then the seeds from the seed heads from a lot of the perennial flowers that I grew there provide food for birds. And so I'm balancing the ecosystem. That's why I tell them, I'm balancing the ecosystem. And then come the middle of February, I'm out there just cutting everything back if it's perennial. All right, so let's get right down to the nuts and the bolts. You gotta have tools. And so I brought my box. I brought my box of pruning tools, and I am a nut for pruner. I have 5 pairs of hand pruners, all the same brand, all the same style. Have you ever met people like that? Not pruning wise, but I'm talking about collectors, right? Where they have to have more than one of the same thing, right? I mean, look at this. I'm so excited. I've had a brand new pair of Felco pruners in the original package, right? 5 years, right? And I'm just waiting for that right moment to open it up. Oh, and pretty soon the package is going to look a little bit old, so I'll have to buy another one. So anyway, all right, so hand pruners. That's, if you had only a small amount of money and someone said, okay, I need to buy a pruner, what kind? Buy the hand pruner. It's the most versatile of all pruners. Hand pruners. Okay, there's 2 kinds. Bypass, that's the one you're looking at. Bypass. That's a pair of pruner where the top blade's the cutting blade, the bottom blade is the cradle. See the cradle? Okay? And so the cutting blade goes by the cradle, just like a pair of scissors. All right? That's the kind of pruner you want to have. You do not want to have the anvil type. The anvil type looks like this. All right? And you say, well, that looks the same. No, it's not. This bottom is not a cradle, it's just a flat anvil. It's a flat piece of metal, and the cutting blade comes down right on the top of it. Boom, just like that. Right? Comes right down. So that means that the blade dulls faster, and it also means that that blade causes more damage to the tissue that you're pruning than the bypass pruner. So a bypass pruner is the very best way to go. I always have 2 pairs of pruners when I'm out in the garden. One in one pocket, another in another pocket. Can you tell me what the difference between those 2 pruners are? No, one for the right-hand pocket, one for the left. Oh, you're a comedian right there. No, this is the pruners that I use to cut things above the ground. This is the pair of pruners I use to cut roots. Okay? Don't ever take a pair of pruners and cut roots and then turn around and cut the above ground parts, because the soil is filled with little bitty rocks that will ruin your blade. Right? So I have a special pair of pruners. Y'all are going, this guy's really nuts. He's got 2 pairs, he wears them both. Yes, I do. All right? And you can see just the difference between the 2 as far as the health of the blade. There's the anvil type. Okay, so there's the problem. But guys, I am not a spokesperson for the company Felco that makes the Felco pruner. Okay, I've tried. Honestly, I've tried. I've wrote them emails. I talked to lots of people about pruners. I'm happy to name Felco. I got nothing in response. So I'm just saying, this is not an endorsement. It's just, I'm a gardener. I use Felco pruners. Great. All the parts you can order parts. You can change the blades. You can pull the blades out. You can sharpen them. You can put them back in. It is the best pruner. My next door neighbor is a born-again gardener. He's a contractor, and he says, if you have the right tool and you know what you're doing, you'll be successful. So buy the right tool. You say, and some of you are like, what about Corona? Corona's a great pruning company as well. I have the pruning saw made by Corona because they make a better saw than Felco makes. Felco makes a better hand pruner than Corona makes. Personal opinion. All right. So why is it that the bypass is better than the anvil? Look at the anvil. The anvil's coming down on a flat surface, and anytime a blade hits, it creates 2 areas of damaged tissue. It's called the crush zone, where the cells are damaged. So if I'm pruning with the anvil pruner, Both sides, the piece of the branch that's falling off and the piece of the branch that is remaining has damaged tissue. But if I'm using the bypass and I make sure I cut correctly, then the crush zone goes with the discard part of the branch and there's no damaged tissue on the other side. That's why it's better. I found that it's great. Don't leave a stub. Just right, too far, too long, too close. What's wrong with this drawing right here? If you prune that close, the bud would have been sliced too. I don't know who the artist was on that, but here's the deal about the stub. There's way more written and spoken about and emphasized about never leaving a stub. I think we are way over the top. We're shooting at the wrong target, okay? What I mean by that is we don't need to be asking how big should the stub be, what's just right. No, we need to be pruning correctly. And let's not worry about the stub. I've left lots of stubs, and guess what? My plants are still alive and happy. Okay? So oftentimes the literature focuses on the wrong thing, and that is this leaving a stub garbage. Okay, now nobody talks about this. Prune with the cradle facing away from the main branch. I am pruning with the cradle facing the main branch, right? Don't see that? Okay, look what happens. Oh, you left a stub. Bryce, you just told us don't worry about the stub. I don't like the stubs because they look funny. Okay? No, I'm going to prune with the cradle facing away from the branch that I'm pruning from, all right? And so as a result, that's the appropriate cut that you should make. Now, guys, if you're thinking like I am, I'm right-handed. By the way, Felco sells a pruner for left-handed people as well. Okay, one of the few pruning companies that does. Anyway, you prune like this. Now, what about the branch that's growing in the other direction? What? No, you have to walk around the shrub. It's gardening. It requires time and effort. And the key to good pruning is you have to be selective. And to be selective means it's going to take more time. And if you understand that, that's fine. Because if you're non-selective, then you aren't pruning. You're shearing. You're shearing. Oh, is that evil? No, it's not pruning. It's shearing. And there's a time and place for that. What's a lopper? A lopper is nothing more than a hand pruner on a stick. Right? Gives you more leverage, gives you height, you can reach in. Oh, by the way, everyone always says, how big a branch can you use a hand pruner on? Well, one that has to be able to fit. That's the first rule. The second rule is not only does it have to fit, but you have to be able to, with one hand, prune it. If you need two hands and then you have to do the pruning dance, then it's too big. You've seen the pruning dance. You kind of do this, right? If you have to put two hands on the pruner, the branch is too big. Okay? You need to go to a bigger pruner. What do you go to? You go to the lopper. The lopper gives you leverage and it gives you reach. It also oftentimes will give you a bigger blade. I don't use loppers. Why not? Because I use a pruning saw. You see, because for me, a pruning saw does just what a lopper does. And I love the pruning saw because it, like my other pruners, fits in my back pocket. Okay, and so there's the pruning saw. The one on the left, there's the big one on the right has a big giant holster. But I like this one because it's like a pocket knife. You press the button, out it comes. There's and these things are sharp. This is the Corona pruner. Okay, probably about $35. Do you notice that has a little hook in the bottom? You see the little hook there? That's for your pinky finger to fit right in comfortably like that. And so here's the secret with the pruning saw. Anything that's too big for a hand pruner, I use the pruning saw. So those are the only two tools I have. With the pruning saw cuts on the pull stroke. It does not cut on the push stroke. It's not like a carpentry saw. It cuts on the pull stroke. All right. Now, why would they design a pruning saw like that? Because we're human, and humans, when they prune, get themselves into some really interesting positions, right? And if this cuts on this stroke, I'm in your lap. Right? But if it cuts on the pull stroke, then I keep my center of gravity and I'm not going to fall off the ladder. Or I'm not going to fall out of the tree. Okay? Corona was very smart because they understand human nature. Okay? Cuts on the pull stroke. I love taking a lab with students out and say, okay, everybody, we're going to cut some branches with a pruning saw. And I'll go up to the branch and I'll go 1, 2, 3. And the branch will fall off. I'll give it to someone else. Okay, you do it. And they're like 1, 2, 3, 4. Bryce, this isn't working. On the pull stroke. That's how it works. And I love it. It's like a pocket knife. It's wonderful. So there's your pruning saw. Those are all the tools you really need. What if the branch is really big? Hire a professional. Okay? Pruning shears, my next favorite tool, the gas-powered steel HS45, 18-inch blade. Shearing, it's not a pair of pruners, it's a hedge trimmer. It does a different kind of cutting, all right? It's non-selective. Okay, that's tools. Now let's talk technique, okay? First thing you do whenever you prune is remove the 5 Ds. 5 Ds. It took me a whole career to come up with 5 words to start with the letter D for what you remove. What do you remove? Remove dead material first. So whenever you're pruning, take out the dead. Then what do? Take out the damage. Prune branches that are still alive, maybe they're damaged. Remove the D. Third D is disease. That also would mean insect-ridden. Okay, if we have infected branches, we're going to remove them. Okay, fourth D, dangerous. These would be branches or stems that are in a place that impose danger to other humans or could be dangerous to the plant. And then my fifth, which is my very favorite, deranged. Okay? A deranged branch is a branch that's growing this way and all the other branches are growing that way, all right? It causes crossed limbs. And when you get crossed limbs, they rub together and that's not a good thing. So I maintain if you approach your pruning, any pruning you do by doing the 5 Ds first, you're 85% done. You're 85% done, okay? Then you can go ahead and then prune for size control or whatever else. So here's a branch right here, follow the green dot. Notice that it is deranged because it is growing out, over, and across this other branch. That's what we call a crossing limb. And so I'm going to remove it right there. You see where the pruner is, and that opens it up. So I'm also thinning a canopy as well, okay? Pruning cuts, 3 basic pruning cuts. This may be the most important part of the talk, so just pay attention. 3 cuts. 1, heading cuts. A heading cut is when you cut above a bud. Guys, I'm going to show you pictures of all of these, but let's look at the words first. Heading cut, you cut above a bud. What it does is it creates more stems and flower buds from where? From below that, where you made that cut. Okay? Just remember this. For every pruning cut you make, it stimulates a growth response. So if you do a heading back cut, you're cutting back above a bud, you're going to get a growth response. And that growth response is going to come just behind where you made that cut. Okay? So you get proliferation of stems, which oftentimes leads to more flowers. Heading cut, that's one kind of pruning cut. Second kind, thinning cuts. We cut the branch back to a leader branch. In other words, if we've got a plant, and I'll show you a photo of this, we got a plant with a very distinct leader branch, and there are other branches growing off of it. A thinning cut is where we cut that branch back to where it meets another. Back in the day, we used to call that pruning cut drop crotching. Yeah, that's a technical term because anytime you have one branch meeting another, that's called a crotch. Okay, so if you prune one branch back to where it meets another, you are drop crotching, right? On an exam one year, I asked that question, and 5 students said crotch dropping. Okay, so what does thinning? What do drop crotch cuts do? Okay, you cut back to the leader branch. What is it? It creates length and weakness. Now, this isn't a negative weakness. It creates length and weakness. When I have a main branch and I cut a branch that comes into it off, that's going to stimulate more growth this way. So it's going to create more length, and as a result, that branch getting longer might be slightly weaker. All right. The third kind of cut is the one that a lot of us do, but we never knew what it was called, myself included, until just a few years ago. The third kind of cut is called a reduction cut. It's also known as re-leadering. What we're doing is we're taking out the leader, we're putting somebody new into that role. All right? Re-leadering, what do? We cut the leader back to a lateral branch. I'll show you a slide. All right? And the lateral branch becomes the new leader. And what does this do? It creates strength. It creates a more strong scaffold of branches. It also reduces height and width of the plant, and it tends to slow growth a little bit. I always thought there were only 2 kinds of pruning cuts, heading back, thinning out. And so when I prune my plants, I'd head them back, I'd thin them out, right? And they grow great. Turns out I was actually doing 3 different kinds of cuts. I was doing heading back, I was doing thinning out, but the majority of the cuts I was doing was this thing called re-leadering, okay? This reduction cut. So let's take a look, okay? What kind of cut is this? I'm cutting above a bud. Heading back, okay? What kind of growth is going to happen when I head it back? These 2 buds are going to get all excited because There's nobody suppressing them anymore, and they're gonna sprout. These buds are gonna sprout. The buds closest to where the heading back cut is are gonna respond. And so we're gonna get an appropriate growth response. Now, do you see that if all you did was heading back cuts, you create a crew cut in a shrub? You do all this heading back, and then you get poof, 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 okay? Do y'all know that thing called crepe murder? That's 100% heading back cuts. And you're just like, Bryce, they don't even cut back to a bud. I know, they just cut back, right? And what happens when you cut back like that? One, you ruin the natural habit of the shrub, okay? But two, you get a proliferation of stems that come where you cut. Okay? So it looks like a crepe myrtle with a crew cut, all right? I tell my students that, they don't know what a crew cut is. Anyway, and then, but I've never seen a crepe myrtle die from crepe murder. It's the wrong name. It should be called crepe maiming. Because you are ruining or maiming the habit of the plant of that shrub. So heading back cuts are reserved for touch-up. We don't start with a heading back cut. We start with the thinning and the reduction cuts. And we finish with the heading back cuts. Does that make sense? Right? Therefore, with the heading back, we're taking care of wild hairs. That's what I'm doing. Okay? Thinning cut. There's the leader. There's the main branch. I'm cutting this branch back to where it meets the main branch. See where these two thinning cuts were made in the drawing? All right? You see how that stimulates growth in length? The reduction cut looks something like this. There's the main branch. The main branch was cut just where a side branch comes in. That's a reduction cut. Thinning cut, you're cutting the branch back from the channeled growth leader. The re-leadering cut is you're cutting the leader and you're redirecting the growth to one of the side branches. Remember, this one creates strength. Both reduce size very effectively. Both reduce size. But one creates a little bit more strength where the other opens up the canopy. So thinning cuts are appropriate as well, but we shouldn't be doing 100% thinning cuts either. Say, Bryce, where do you start? I start with reduction cuts, then I do my thinning cuts, and then I finish with my heading back cuts. All right? So there's the relief. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go out in my little dwarf ginkgo, and I'm going to look at this. Can you see where the leader is? Right? There's the leader. Okay, so I'm going to re-leader this because this is growing out over my driveway. Right here. Right in front of me. And it needs to go. So I'm going to cut back. And I'm going to cut back here. So I'm re-leadering. I'm getting rid of that leader, and I'm letting this one become the new leader. And as a result of that cut, the growth slows and is more well distributed. And I've also taken care of a piece of branch that sticks out into the driveway. So there it is. I'm cutting, and that's how it looks. Now, some of you may look and say, that's a bit awkward looking. You up and then over it goes. So what I do is, if this is too long, then how do I handle that? Cut right here, do a little head back cut, and all is well. So you see the balance. Now, y'all are looking at me going, Bryce, you realize that this actually is going to take some time and some thinking. Yes. Okay. The guy out there with that doesn't take any time, and it also doesn't take any thinking. What does it result in? Everything gets cut. Right? Is there a place for that? Yes. Formal hedges, it's a place for that. But to do that as a way to prune for the reasons we listed doesn't really work. All right? So up on the upper left, we've got heading back. See what the results. By the way, if I were to head back this tree and you drove up after I was done and you looked at this tree, would you know that it was pruned? Oh, yes, immediately. If all I did was heading back. Okay? Whereas if I thin, there it is, and I thin it and reduce, this is what it looks like when it's done. If you drove up and saw this, would you go, oh, that's recently been pruned? Typically not. Typically not. So it tends to push us in a direction where we're maintaining the natural habit of the plant. So maintenance pruning. So for size control, we use a combination of selective cuts, but don't start with heading back. Start with thinning, start with reduction, then thinning, then heading back in order to complete that whole approach. Okay? If you're trying just to thin a canopy, then just use thinning cuts to open it up and have that still be growing out. Okay? If you want to build structure and strength into a shrub or a tree, then use some reduction cuts, because that's what that prune cut accomplishes. Okay? And then promote density and more flower buds, heading. Heading creates more bud break, and ultimately you're going to get more flower buds. However, I will tell you this, I've seen a lot of reduction pruning on crepe myrtles where by the time the summer came, they were stunning and full of flowers. So please don't take these 100% literally that if all I do is thinning, I'm not going to get any more flowers. Good pruning that's selective will promote good growth on all levels. For every pruning cut you make, it elicits or creates a pruning response. Last thing, this is the one that everybody worries about. Can I prune this now? Can I prune it now? Okay, here's a couple of little bits of information. Research shows that there's only one time in the year when your pruning actually damages tissue. Okay? First of all, plants have no nervous system. You can never hurt a plant. You can hurt someone's feelings. You can hurt a person. You can't hurt a plant. You can damage tissue, yes, but that doesn't hurt the plant. The plant feels no pain. Now, I know there are some people out there, not you, but out there, okay, really out there, who believe that plants have feelings. There's nothing to support that. There's no science to support that plants actually have an emotional, right? The only time you can damage tissue when you prune is when the wood is frozen. Did you hear me? The wood. Does anybody know how cold it has to be for the wood of a hydrangea to be frozen? I just heard it. I heard it don't get that cold here. You're right, it doesn't. Okay? The air temperature would have to be 0 or below for the wood to be frozen. 27-degree ambient air temperature doesn't freeze tissue, doesn't freeze Japanese maple wood. Okay? So here's the irony of it all. Hey, Sue, it's 14 below out there. I think I'm going to go out and prune. Who does that? Who does that? So here's the take-home message is, stop worrying about whether you're hurting your plants or whether now's the right time. You can prune anytime you want. Now there are some times that are better than others, right? So when it comes to timing, understand this. There are better times to prune than others. You don't want to prune off desirable plant parts before they display themselves. So you have a plant that has these big, beautiful buds now getting ready to open, and Dumbo goes out and prunes. You've removed the flowers. Have you damaged the shrub? No. Have you hurt the plant? No. You've just ruined the effect. So there's better times than others in order to gain the greatest amount of response from the plant. Okay, so we can stop using language like, well, I don't want to hurt the plant. No, you want to prune the plant so that it will give you all of what you bought it for. All right? Which would be flowers and fruits typically. All right, so let's to that. This is very simple. We just have to understand how plants grow. Ready for a little bit of botany? All right, plants have 3 growth stages when they're growing. Okay, 3 different events. Contrary to popular belief, plants don't grow all the time. They have these events, right? And there's 3 kinds of events. First one, it's when it flowers. When a plant flowers, what does that mean? The buds open, displaying the flowers. So over here on the left, that plant is what? It's flowering. Okay, that's a growth response. Flower. Okay, buds open. That's 1. 2, flush. Flush is when vegetative growth comes popping out of the buds. Leaves, stems, vegetative growth. That's called a growth flush. Okay, so if you say, oh, my Japanese maples are flushing, that you're telling people that it's pushing out vegetative growth. You with me? Okay, third one, which very few people think about, and that is set buds. When a plant sets buds, what is it doing? It's forming flower buds on the stem. That's called setting buds. Guys, that's an event that happens during the year. It sets buds. Got it? Flower, flush, set buds. Now all we got to do is put them in the right order and attach them to the right plants. It's that simple. It's that complicated. So we have plants that flower in the spring. Rhododendron, azaleas, many different hydrangeas. Flower like these hydrangeas right here. These hydrangeas flower on last year's wood, right? They flower on old wood. So those plants that flower on old wood, somebody tell me, what's the first thing they do in the spring? It starts to get warmer. You got three choices. They flush, they set buds, or they flower. What is a rhododendron, an azalea, hydrangea? What does it do first? No. It flowers first. That's the very first thing. It flowers. And when it's finished flowering, what does that hydrangea do? It flushes. And then when it finishes flushing, later in the summer, early fall, what does it do? Sets buds. Azaleas, rhododendrons, things that flower early spring, they're setting buds the fall before they're going to open in the spring. Got it? So it wouldn't make sense to prune them in the spring, would it? No, if we prune them in the spring, we're pruning off all the buds before they open. So, flower first, then flush, then set buds. Okay? Azaleas, rhododendrons, some hydrangeas, not all, that's why it gets confusing. When do we prune them? We prune after flowering. So when the azaleas finished flowering, like now, like a month ago, okay, that's when we prune it, because what's the next thing it does after it flowers? It flushes. So if I prune it and then it's in the line to flush, it's going to flush, and then what is it going to do? It's going to set buds, and then we leave it alone until next spring, because the first thing it does next spring is flower. Prune after flower. By the way, that equals prune before flushing. So, somebody chuckled over here, and that just broke me. You're driving home this afternoon, roots grow where there's water and air, prune before flushing, prune before flushing, okay? And make sure that you remember what it means to flush, but prune before flushing works, does it not? All right, let's look at another category, okay? Or the same category, your oak leaf hydrangeas. There's a native plant that flowers on last year's wood. So when are you going to prune these? Once they're done flowering. I was at a Riverbank Zoo and Botanical Garden yesterday. They had some gorgeous, the children's garden, they had some gorgeous oak leaf hydrangeas, little dwarf guys. And they're in full flower right now. And they weren't pruned this early this spring, but they will prune them. If needed, they'll prune them once those flowers turn brown. Late spring, early summer. All right? That's oak leaf hydrangea. Okay? Macrophyllum, these types, the historical Asian hydrangeas. All flower on old wood. We prune them after they flower. Yeah, Bryce, but you know, these flowers stick around for a long time now. They've bred longevity into these flowers. I know. Prune them after they flower, which means that if this needs to be pruned, you might have to face a choice to prune them before these flowers turn brown. Because these flowers will stay like this for a long time and they'll still start to flush. But I'm not saying you have to prune any shrub every year. There's no rule that says you have to prune it every year. You prune it when it fulfills one of those needs. Camellias, Daphne, witch hazels, Mahonia, all these, where they come out and flower first, always you prune after flowering before flushing. Now, summer flowering, crepe myrtle, honeysuckle. It's funny, honeysuckle is called summer flowering because mine's flowering now, right? But it's flowering on new wood. So it's, again, new wood comes out. So what do the summer flowering plants do first? You're so cute. You don't want to commit. What's the first thing a crepe myrtle does in the early spring? Flushes. Then what does it do? It sets buds. Then it flowers. So in this case, the summer flowering stuff, the order's different, but the time in between is different as well, right? Because it's flushing first, and then as soon as it finishes flushing, it sets buds, right? And then it flowers immediately. Whereas the azalea, it flowers, then it flushes, then it sets buds. So it's just the time in between. From setting buds to flowering is long. It's like September until springtime. Where here, when that crepe myrtle sets buds, just inhale a couple of times and the buds will start to open. So setting buds and flowering are side by side so when do you prune these guys? Prune before flushing. When is that? Early spring, January, February, March. Prune away, right? So crepe myrtle, honeysuckle, prune right before flushing. So if you had to tell someone in 3 words when they should be pruning their stuff, you got one answer that says it all. Prune before flushing. but that means something different for the summer flowering versus the spring flowering. So that means it's a teachable moment. When you say, prune before flushing, they'll go, what? And then you can say, well, there's summer flowering, there's spring flowering, here's the order. Because it's really important to remember that, because there's so many people that are pruning their oak leaf hydrangeas, right, in the early spring and going, I don't understand why they didn't flower. Okay, guess what I did this spring? I pruned my oak leaf hydrangeas. I did it on purpose. Why did I prune them? Early spring. They were so dang large, and I didn't want to have, they would take up the whole path if I waited until after they finished flowering. So I, knowledgeable gardener, made a choice to reduce the flowers for that year. I sacrificed the flowers for that year. That's good horticulture. So if you choose to do that, and you do it knowingly, that's good horticulture. If you choose to do it thinking it's going to be good and it's not, that's ignorance. There's a big giant gray area between good horticulture and ignorance, right? So, hydrangea arborescens are smooth hydrangea. Oh man, I saw that there's a planting at the Riverbanks Zoo and Garden when you walk into the big tiered area where there's 2 rows of hydrangea arborescens and they're all budded up. And I said, I gotta come back and see them when they're in full flower, right? They flower on new growth. So when am I pruning my smooth hydrangeas in my garden? February 15th. How far am I pruning them? Ankle. And what am I getting? That. When? 3 weeks from now in Raleigh. Isn't that awesome? But do you understand? I do that confidently. Hydrangea arborescens, this one's Annabelle. Hydrangea paniculata, the panicle hydrangeas, they both bloom on new wood. Prune them in the early spring, you're still going to get summer flower. Macrophylla and Quercifolia, the oak leaf, those 2, you got to prune them after they flower, before they flush. All right? That solves the decades mystery of when to prune hydrangeas. Everybody's always like, I just don't know. Because it's confusing. It's confusing. Okay? Hydrangea paniculata, that's the other one. Spirea japonica flowers on new wood. Flowers on new wood. My neighbors all come out and watch. They all come out like this. And I take my hedge trimmers and I go up to my spireas on March 1st and I just cut them to the ground, just like this. And my next door neighbor, Celia, her husband had lived next door for 40 years. And every year she goes, if I did that to mine, how come yours flower when you do that? And so that's a teachable moment. And I said, okay, Celia, we've got spring, flush, new growth. She doesn't. She's trying. I said, just come out and prune when I prune. Just come out and when you see me doing it, I said, I'll do it for you. I have a big tool and it's non-selective. I can just mow it down. Okay. Flowers and fruit, not an issue. Japanese maple, evergreens. When do we prune? You know the answer. Prune before flushing. Yeah, but if you prune an evergreen after it flushes, is that illegal? If you're pruning things where the flowers don't matter or the fruits don't matter, prune away. Just don't prune when it's minus 14 degrees outside. Okay? So Japanese maples, guess when I prune my Japanese maples? If they need pruning. Prune them in January. I put my earbuds in, I go outside on a mild day in January, spend a whole day out there doing reduction and thinning cuts on my Japanese maples. And I got some Japanese maples that take a long time to prune. I only prune them once every 3 or 4 years. I just don't, they get so thick sometimes I need to thin that canopy out a little bit. So is that big enough? Prune before flushing. Okay, but what about hollies and other fall fruiters? We got hollies that we're putting in our landscape for the fruit in the fall, and they flower, right? And they flower early spring, and if I prune them after they flower, I'm pruning off their fruit. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Okay. See, these hollies are in full flower. Those flowers are going to become fruits. And so if I prune according to the rules, I'm going to prune before flushing. And when I do that, I'm going to prune these off. So when I prune hollies, I'm very judicious about how much I take off at any given time. Or, like my hydrangeas, I might pick a year that's going to be fallow for fruit. where I'll cut them way back because they need it. I've decided they need it. And then that fall, they're not gonna be fruiting very much at all. But again, I made that choice. But again, when we talk about when to prune, please don't translate that into every year you need to prune your hydrangeas, depending on the hydrangea. Every year you need to prune. No, you need to prune when you know it's a need. And that's not necessarily every year. I have plants in my landscape, I can't remember the last time I pruned them. And they're doing fine. As long as I follow that rubric of logical reasons to prune. What about perennials? Well, on some perennials, they get so stinking tall that they flop. Y'all like flopping in the garden? That's the bane of living in the South. You get these herbaceous perennials grow so fast, and then you get your first thunderstorm, and they all go, right? And you're out there with bamboo stakes and trying all kinds of, it's horrible. And so what I do when this Amsonia flowers, and it typically flowers in March, early April, as soon as it finishes flowering, I cut it back to 8 inches, and it reflushes. And it never gets tall enough to flop, because I've cut it back at that time. There, just like that. And it drives some of my neighbors crazy. They're like, oh, you cut that back, even after it flowers. I said, just wait. And then I get this. You get that wonderful fall color on the Amsonia. Okay. Same with the phloxes, garden phloxes. They get so big in my garden. So you probably right around the end of May, they'll be almost chest high, and I'll cut them back to the knee. And then they branch, and I get that kind of flowering from a phlox. So we can judiciously choose certain perennials that might grow extra large in order to maximize their flowering. And then sometimes I'll do summer pruning on black-eyed Susans and phlox so that they reflower. You do a little deadheading and you get a little bit of a reflower. Now in September I'll get flowers on phlox, but nowhere near to the degree that I get them in the summertime. There, I get some growth. So remember a couple of things. Every time you prune, you elicit a growth response. You stimulate some kind of growth response. But now you know that what kind of cut you make, you'll know what kind of growth response you get. And then by being smart about when you prune, then you will be able to retain the very things you planted that tree or shrub in your garden to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the nuts and bolts of gardening. Excuse me, of pruning. There's way more nuts and bolts on gardening. Okay. Now I know it's just about 2 o'clock, but I was told I would be happy to. I would give the opportunity to answer any questions. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
I have a Rosa Sharon. It's a double blossom or a double pink, and it'll get buds, and they'll start to open, and then that's it.
So Rosa Sharon, Hibiscus syriacus, can be a very temperamental plant when it comes to being willing to open its flowers. And typically the hibiscus that I've noticed that have trouble where they get right to that bud stage and they look like yippee, and then they don't, are like the double flowering kinds. Is it the double flowering? And that's just kind of a natural tendency. I don't know of any logical, or I have not ever found any specific cultural solution to that problem. Yeah. And I had a variegated one. The leaf was variegated. It was a double pink. I could get it fully budded. I could never get those guys to open. Yeah. So that's when I decided it was genetic. Would I cut Sweet William back? No, probably not, because they're so quick to flower after they grow. So I've got a bunch of Sweet William that's this tall and just flopped this past weekend because of a thunderstorm. Sometimes we just have to deal with it. Yeah, prop them up. Typically, I'll cut them back after they flower. Yeah, and get them to produce some more vegetative stems from below. Yes.
How do you know if your hydrangeas are those that bloom on old wood versus new?
Good question. How do you know? You call your local county extension office and talk with that agent, and they will be more than happy, I hope, to come down and take a look. Find somebody that knows. How do you know what kind of hydrangea you have? Yeah. Send me an email. Show me and a photo, and hopefully from that we could see. Yeah. Anything else? Y'all have been fantastic. I really appreciate your attention. Hope you have a good afternoon.
Well, that's a Bryce great. Incredible knowledge, they really do. So thank you so much for coming down and being a part of this event. I also love coming up very end when everybody's ready to go, and I'm right after the paid speaker, and everybody really wants to hear from me. So, but I do want to thank a few people today. So, first of all, I want to thank all the sponsors and all the people who donated auction items from the community. It means so much to our students and scholarships, and the foundation really appreciates all of your donations. I also want to thank the garden clubs. The garden clubs are wonderful to show up to this event, buy tickets, they buy sponsorships, and they also do wonderful work with the container gardening. How did y'all like the container gardens this year? Did y'all like the, having, the People's Choice Award? Did y'all like voting on that? I thought that was kind of fun. A little bit different, but the reason I liked it is I felt like it really displayed the hard work of those, the gardeners that we have. We have some really good gardeners in our community. And so today we want to vote, we want to award the winner, and it's the Late Bloomers Garden Club. Ms. Crawford puts that one together for the Late Bloomers almost every year. So we really appreciate all the work that she has done, and we appreciate whoever bid on those, and hopefully we'll make a little bit of money for scholarships. So thank y'all for that. What letter? Do y'all remember? E. E as in elephant. Okay? It was beautiful. Okay. And a couple more things to remember. The begonias are $5 each. So don't forget to get out of here with maybe a Mother's Day gift for yourself or for others. We want to thank High Cotton, who donates those each year. They grow them from seed, and we're really appreciative of the work they do and the donation that they give us for those begonias. So go out and buy some. Also on the way out, make sure you check on the posters to see if you won anything in the auction. And if you didn't win, don't worry. There are still some containers out there that were decorations that you can buy one of those. So buy a begonia, buy some decor, or go pay for your auction items. There are some tables in the atrium. So be sure to go by there. There is also food out there. Chick-fil-A is always gracious. They donate some wonderful food for us to eat at the end of our event, because of course we didn't eat enough with Buckridge when we started. So get yourself a nibble on the way out the door. Thank you, Chick-fil-A, for that kind donation each year. Don't forget about us after the summer break. After you get through the summer, we are going to have our food and wine event in the fall, and we'll start planning that very soon. And that, once again, will go towards scholarships here at the school. So we're proud of our college, and we really want to support it. So please come back and buy some more tickets. And lastly, we want to thank the attendees of this event. Without you guys, we wouldn't have an event. So give yourself a round of applause and have a great day. And if you have any specific questions for Bryce, he is willing to stay and answer a few more questions. But everybody else, round on up.
We do have just a few more auction door prizes if anybody wants a minute to draw. This time we have a plant that's been great. Many of our plants were donated by Friends of the Foundation, who work all year to grow things in their garden, and they kindly dig those up and repot them, and we get to use them for fun things here. And these are paired with some beautiful new greeting cards that Miss Elsie Fogel is inspired and created from one of her gorgeous paintings, and we're just so grateful for that. So I'm gonna draw five. We have five more. The first number is 8961. I guess it's 1908, but 961. Great. The second number is 905. Oh, we'll put it with it. You can grab it on your way down. The third is 952. Oh, great. And then we have 045.
Wait, that's okay.
Okay, great. We have 962. That's our last one. 962. Right, yeah, teachers here with that one. Thank you all so very much. Oh, and I want to thank, I used to work at college and I know how much work our plant staff puts into this event, helping us get set up. And we're just grateful for all the volunteers and everyone who makes it so possible. Thank you.